I pay homage to the Buddha, the Gautama, who taught out of his compassion, the holy Dharma to rid us of all distorted views. So today we're going to cover the 9th chapter of the Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, which mainly establishes emptiness. So when doing that, on the one hand, we need to refute the objects held by innate misconception, which is conceives misconception of true existence, and in doing so, we also go through lots of arguments back and forth amongst different philosophical schools who have their own presuppositions about the true existence. And so, in order to help sentient beings, the Buddha helps sentient beings enter into this understanding of emptiness through various means, such as understanding of the signlessness, the door to liberation, which is called signlessness, and aspirationless, and so forth, emptiness. So all this comes down to this door of liberation called the emptiness. So we need to understand it. So all the religious traditions do acknowledge that we are ruined by our negative emotions, for example, anger or hatred, and therefore there are the practices of cultivating compassion, patience, tolerance, and also in order to counter our greed, there is also the teaching of the contentment, the practice of contentment in all these religious traditions, and also those actions that ensue from these negative emotions in our speech and body. And therefore, we need to we need to practice counterforce to this, and therefore there is the practice of self-discipline in all the religious traditions. And then with regards to countering our attachment, there are lots of teachings on this, countering teachings that help us to counter our attachment to essential objects. Go back. Okay. And so the different religious traditions have teachings to counter this greed and our attachment. And then in Buddhism, because anger is related to attachment, the greater your attachment to something, naturally what opposes it, what is opposite to it, also gives us anger or hatred. Do you hear me? And then there's also a more deeper level of countering these two emotions of attachment and anger or hatred. So how to deal with this in a deeper way. And so it's taught in the Buddha Dharma. So it is taught that this clinging to self or Atman. So I usually say that if there is some beautiful item in a shop, you may see it and you may say, oh, how nice it is. And there will be some degree of attachment or desire. And then because of the desire, you will go ahead to buy it, or in the worst case scenario, you will even try to steal it. And so this is due to our desire. So once you buy that thing that you have liked in the shop, and it becomes your possession, your attachment to it increases even more. So first there is this attractive thing in the shop, and if that, while in the shop, somehow it drops on the ground, you'll say, oh, how bad. But when it really becomes your possession and it really falls on, and it falls on the ground, you will really feel some loss. Because of this attachment which comes through this, the object being your possession, in relation to yourself, you become more attached to it. So when we talk about something beautiful or attractive, it is in relation to yourself, and not you won't say that because it's beautiful to everybody else, it's beautiful, but because it's beautiful to you. And therefore, when you have this greater sense of I, a stronger sense of I, then there's greater sense of greater attachment to things as well. So when someone is really attached to something and something goes wrong with that object, then the person becomes it becomes totally unbearable that it broke or something bad happened to it. So sometimes people even go to the length of saying that I want to commit suicide because there's no point in living in this life. When something becomes desperate. And so the attachment, the degree of attachment is related to one's sense of I. If your sense of I is not that strong, then the attachment to the things, of course you may still feel that the thing belongs to you, but there won't be so much sense of loss. So do you actually feel like that? So in relation to the sense of I that you have, the greater or lesser degree of it, accordingly you'll have attachment, strong or less. And therefore in Buddhism, grasping at a self is said to be the main cause of attachment to things or anger. And therefore there is lots of investigation into, analysis into this self. So we all have the sense of my body, my mind, my speech. You'll say, whose body and mind's speech are these? And then you'll say, it's mine. And then you also talk about my possessions, my wealth, my honor, name, and so forth. So there is this sense of how precious this I or self is to us. So this precious self, if you ask, where is it? From top of my head, the crown, down to the sole of my feet, you will not be able to pinpoint anything as being you. And then some scientists also have said that there's no central authority in our brain which controls it. And so from within our body, nothing can be pointed to as being the self. And then with regard to this consciousness, the five sense consciousnesses cannot be the self, because when you are asleep, they are no more there. And therefore, the five sense consciousnesses are not the self. And now you may say, with point the self within the mental consciousness. When you are awake, your mind is rather in a coarser level. And then during dream time, it's the subtler. And then during when you become unconscious, it's subtler. And then when you die, it's still subtler, at a subtler level. And so once somebody dies and the heartbeat stops and the blood circulation also stops, so once that happens, then soon after that, then there's brain death. So the person is said to be clinically dead. But sometimes, although some people may be clinically dead, but still the body itself remains fresh. And so in India, in the last 55 years, as far as we knew, there were 20 or 30 people. Some, even after clinical death, remained in 1, 2, 3, or 4 weeks. The body remained fresh. So there's no sensory perceptions anymore. And then the consciousness, which are dependent on our brain, also have stopped. And so it's because the body remains fresh, it indicates that there's something. And in our tradition, we make distinction between subtle and gross levels of mind. And therefore, after the dissolution of the consciousness of the body, and then also the grosser levels of mind, and also the 80 conceptions and so forth, they got into Goya Samaja. And when someone reaches, when you reach the subtle mind, then you go through the dissolution of the 3 visions also. Whitish appearance, reddish increase, and blackish near attainment. And then after that, it goes subtler. And so there are these different degrees of subtlety within the mind. There are the gross ones and subtle, and then the subtlemost. So even after brain death, it indicates that there is a mind or consciousness which has nothing to do, is not related to the brain. It's still there within the body. And as soon as the body, this consciousness, the subtle consciousness, leaves the body, then the body kind of bends. If someone is in a meditative posture, before that, the head kind of drops. So my own senior tutor, the late senior tutor Ling Rinpoche, Rinpoche, actually stayed in this kind of meditation even after clinical death for 13 days. And then one of the previous Garden Tripas, Lobsang Nyima Rinpoche, stayed in this kind of meditation even after clinical death for about 21 days or so. And so these days we have some electrodes to put on someone on the body of someone who is clinically dead. So we have started this kind of investigation. So we can say that there are different degrees of subtlety of mind. or consciousness. So within this mind itself, the mental consciousness, if you were to point to any of the state of consciousness as being the mind, the self, then it would only come to the point of saying that the subtlest consciousness, the subtlest consciousness at the time of death, the clear light of death, has to be the self. But so in this way, if you try to analyze the body into the different parts and then down to the subtlest particles, you will not be able to pinpoint anything as being the self, nor within the mind. So apart from Buddhism, the other religious traditions assert Atman, or soul. So those non-Buddhist traditions which assert life after death, rebirth, they do assert that this Atman is what goes from this life to the next, and what has come from the past to the present life. So this is what they assert. And then, according to the theistic religious traditions, even after death, the person is put in a coffin, and then when the final judgment comes, it is said that whether the person has to go to hell or heaven is decided. And so they have this theory of soul as well. But Buddhism, according to Buddhism, there is no self separate from the psychophysical aggregates. Blessing for the tea. The qualities of the Buddha is inconceivable, the qualities of Dharma inconceivable, the qualities that the Arya Sangha is inconceivable, and keeping faith in these three inconceivables has three inconceivable merit. So I offer this tea and bread to the three inconceivables.
Oh, good.
She needs to you put the clip, it's better. You need a radio? You don't have a radio? Really? You have a radio? You should have a radio to listen. She needs radio. One, two, three, check, 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 check. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yours? Are you getting it? So a self which is separate from the psychophysical aggregates, if you were to assert it, just to, as a joke, I would like to ask whether the soul is there any difference in the soul as being female or male? So can we say the soul is young or old? And then, if you think of soul, if you consider, then you can't maybe talk about being I'm old or I'm young and so forth, because soul is something which is permanent, unchanging. So last year, when I was in Bangalore, in a Hindu ashram, where I met the head of the ashram, who actually, the ashram is helping and serving food for thousands of students in different schools in Karnataka, carrying the rice and meals in trucks. So I had a discussion with this Hindu Swami. So I told him that we have the same, the common practice of the three trainings, the training of morality, concentration, and wisdom. So we have the practice of single point concentration and so forth. I told him we have these common. The difference lies between Hinduism and Buddhism. The difference lies in the idea whether one accepts Atman or whether one rejects Atman. But I said should make no difference to us. You believe in Atman, so you can go about with your business with that. And I believe in an Anatman, and I can do my practices based on that concept. And so these are, I told him that these are private business. And so the rejection of self or Atman in Buddhism is that there is no self or Atman which is separate from the psychophysical aggregates. And so if there is no change in the Atman, for example, then you cannot talk about aging or young Atman. So once I knew one Indian from Bihar who practiced Buddhism and later on took bhikshu ordination from me. And so after his bhikshu ordination, we talked about self. And I said, there's no self. So when I said there's no self, he was trembling. And he said, how come if there's no self? I mean, then slowly I calmed him down, and I said that when we when we talk about selflessness, we are not saying that the self which works and comes performs actions like eating and so forth is not denied. But what we are denying is a self, a permanent, unchanging self or Atman, which is separate from the psychophysical aggregates. So sometimes people get such idea that when Buddhism completely rejects self or person. But what we are rejecting is the self which is separate from the psychophysical aggregates, and on the basis of which this kind of idea of a permanent, unchanging self, separate from the psychophysical aggregates, It is said that this is not an innate kind of conception, or but it's something which comes through learning or philosophical ideas. So Master Chandrakirti also says that there is no such a self which is separate from the psychophysical aggregates. And then in the sutra, Buddha says, with regard to self, this notion of a self is a devilish mind. So when you have a very strong sense of I, as if this I has a separate entity, is a separate entity, then what happens is this gives rise to our attachment and anger. And so all the different distorted views are rooted in this kind of view or conception. And then the Buddha goes on to say that this composite aggregate, the compounded aggregate, is empty, and therefore there is no self. And therefore what this means is that there is no self which is separate from the psychophysical aggregates. What does it mean? That the self is not at all existent? No. But the Buddha goes on to say in that same, continues to say that just as a self is, he says that the self is designated on the basis of psychophysical aggregates, just as a chariot is designated on the basis of its parts put together. When you have all the different parts put together in a certain fashion, then you have a chariot. Likewise, on the basis of the 5 aggregates or 4 aggregates, but we can say 5 aggregates, on the basis of that, then we have a self or a person designated. But when you break apart these different parts of the body and mind, and then there is no self. But so this shows that there is a self. We are not denying the conventional self. We have a self or a person experiencing, who creates karma and who experiences the results of those karma as well. So what we are rejecting when we say, when we talk about selflessness, so as I said earlier, a self which is separate from the psychophysical aggregates, which is unchanging and so forth, is something which is asserted through philosophical ideas. But what happens to us innately is that we get a sense of an I, which is somewhere there. And therefore we say, my body, my mind. Of course, when we say my body, my mind, it shows that there is a self. But when we have that sense of I, what happens there is also that we get a sense of an I, a notion that as if this I is something self-standing, and therefore we have the sense of an I which is like a controller of the body and the mind. So because of this sense of I, we sometimes can say that I want to chop off a part of my body which is not good and so forth. For example, me, Bhikshu Tenzin Gyatso, I can also feel like that. Someone who is not so knowledgeable, but is not, but he or she is interested in learning. And when such a person sees someone who is knowledgeable, he feels that if I could also have that kind of knowledge, And so in the Pramana Vartika, there is this mention of someone wanting to, if it's possible for us to actually change our body with the body of a deity and so forth, we would do that. So there is this sense of an I which is substantially self-sufficiently existent. So within that, there is this sense of substantially self-sufficient I, which has the same kind of characteristics as the aggregates, and also another one which doesn't have the same characteristics. So we get this sense there of an I. We think that I was there when I was born, and I still am here, and I will be in the future, and so forth. But when you think about the body, you will not say this body you have now was there at birth. You think as if this body has aged. But when it comes to this I, the sense of the I, you don't have this feeling or the sense of its aging. So we get the sense that, the mind and the body can change through conditions, but the I or the self does not. So we get this notion as if this I or the self is somewhat different from the psychophysical aggregates. So when you have the sense of an I, there is a self-sufficient, substantially existent I, and actually think that it is something which is separate from the body and the mind, then it's similar to the non-Buddhist idea of permanent single self. An autonomous self. But when, and on the other hand, when you get this notion of an I, which seems to have the same kind of characteristics as the body, somewhere within or amongst the body and the mind, then it's slightly different. For example, in the case of Chittamatra, they talk about 8 different consciousnesses. Why do they have to posit the alaya vijnana, the foundational consciousness? It's because they look for an identity of a person within the aggregates, and then since they cannot point it in relation to the body, therefore they go into the mind, and then within the mind they say that this alaya vijnana is the identity of the person. So they have to find something objective within the psychophysical aggregates, which has to be the self. And then also within the Madhyamaka tradition, there are those who posit that the 6th consciousness is the final identity of a person. But Master Nagarjuna has said that a person is neither the different elements such as water, earth, fire, and so on, the space. And he says that all of this is not the self, which means that the combination of these elements is not the self. And then he asked, what else is, apart from this, what else is the self? So he says there's nothing which we can posit as being the I within the psychophysical aggregates and these elements. But does it deny? Is he denying self wholesale? No, because he says that a person is designated on the basis of the 6 constituent factors. And in Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara, he says that through the 7-fold reasoning, although we cannot actually find anything as being the person, an identity of the person as such, but On the basis of the aggregates, we still designate, and therefore a self is merely designated. On the basis of the object, the basis of designation, which are the five psychophysical aggregates. And so apart from being merely designated, there is no self. So Master Nagarjuna says that because a person is designated, or is the combination of these six constituent factors, therefore there is no self, as the sutra says. So form, matter, and so forth, which are the elements. So for example, in the case of something physical, we can actually break it up into its parts. And then regarding consciousness, we can actually break it up into the moments. So through this kind of analysis, then if we were to pinpoint something as being consciousness, where is the consciousness? We could talk about past consciousness, future mind, and present mind, and so forth. So we can, if it's okay to posit a consciousness which is merely designated. But if that consciousness were to have any objective existence, then we also talk about past, future, and present century. But regarding the present century, for example, it has 100 years. So if the present century were to have any true objective existence, within it we cannot talk about past and future years and decades. And within the decades, we can also talk about, with regard to decades, we can also talk about the three times, past, future, and present. So in relation to something else, then we can talk about the past, future, and present mind as well. So just as a century can be, we can have a present century, past and future centuries. If they were to have any objective independent existence, then the whole century as a whole has to be present. But within that, we cannot talk, we have decades. And then within decades, we can talk about past, future, and present decades. And then we can go to years, months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, seconds. So we can only have past and future, but when you really do this kind of analysis, there's no present. But past and future are also posited in relation to the present. But when the present itself is not there, then what happens? So we think about future a lot, doing this and that in the future. But where is the future? So even within the consciousness, if you talk about, if you make this distinction between past, future, and present, past is gone, future is yet to come, and this present cannot be found, except that it's a continuity. But within that continuity, you cannot pinpoint any moment as being this. And therefore, we can see that it's merely designated. And so Master Nagarjuna says that a person is a combination of these six constituent factors, and there is no ultimate existence of a person, independent existence. And therefore, we designate a person. But when we designate, we use a name. There is a name and the object to which it refers to. But when you actually look at the go to the object itself, you cannot find anything as being that. So, of course, things exist. We refer to them by these different terms and names. And since they cannot be found when you analyze the objects itself, what we come down to is that it's merely designated, because nothing exists objectively, but also the things do function. And then in quantum physics, they go into the subatomic particles and analyze all the subatomic particles, and then they come to the quarks and so forth. And so you can go into these smaller and smaller parts within the atomic in the atomic level, subatomic levels. And therefore, the scientists, when they find that they cannot see anything objectively existing, they find themselves in some kind of a dilemma. But in India, it is said since by Nagarjuna and so forth that things do exist, but merely by way of designation. And there's nothing which exists objectively. Although nothing exists objectively, they are still designated. They do have existence by way of designation. But what happens is we do not get that sense of the things being designated, that as if they have some kind of objective existence. That is what happens to us. And so the seventh Dalai Lama has said that nothing can be found when we analyze them, and therefore we come to understand this true, the ultimate reality of emptiness. How wonderful, he says. So of course in the world we talk about things being bad or good, and I like things which are good and I don't like things that are bad. So why is it important to understand that things do not have any inherent existence at all? This is very important. I actually think, as Master Nagarjuna has said, that exhaustion of karma and delusions is liberation, and so forth. So there are many statements found in Master Nagarjuna's text. We cannot just say, oh, just because Master Nagarjuna says so, we have to believe it. But we need to really give thought to them. Roughly speaking, if you think you do not want suffering but want happiness, this is something nobody needs to prove to you. It's innate feeling. So from this we can infer that others also are same in wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. And therefore you can also feel how good if others could have happiness and no suffering as well. So we can think about the whole sentient beings, and particularly the sentient beings in this world, and particularly we can also focus on the 7 billion people wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. And so this kind of compassion can be extended to all, but not anger or hatred. You cannot have anger to the whole humanity on this earth unless you are really fool or a mad or crazy person. So compassion doesn't need whether the others are called known to you or not. But anger has to focus on people you know. So someone related to you must be an object of our anger. So as I mentioned, Aaron Beck, the American psychiatrist, said that when you are angry at somebody, the person looks negative, but 90% of that negativeness is your own mental projection. And so anger needs an independent target. So afflictions like attachment needs independent targets to focus on. We may be able to have compassion to all sentient beings, but is it possible to have attachment to all sentient beings? Maybe we are attached to those whom we are related and not otherwise. And therefore, anger and attachment need independent target. So loving kindness and compassion are said to be non-conceptual. So we do not need to have any kind of independent target for this. But as the basis, the grasping at some kind of a independent existence as a basis is not needed, whereas attachment and anger needs that as a basis. So when you think about and reflect on the selflessness, the view of selflessness, thinking that the things do not have any existence, the way they appear to me, it can help reduce your attachment and anger without having to go through the process of cultivating single-pointed concentration on and building up the kind of concentration for higher realms of existence, but by meditating on emptiness itself, it can help reduce us attachment and anger. So what this shows is that attachment and anger are rooted in the grasping at some kind of true objective existence and things. So Master Nagarjuna says that the exhaustion of karma and delusions is liberation, and karma and delusions come from our inappropriate mentation, and they in turn come from some kind of a fabrication, and emptiness actually helps to overcome it. So we need to reflect on these by relating these quotations to our own experiences, and then you will see the effect and you'll see the truth in these teachings. So this, so as Master Nagarjuna says, the emptiness puts an end to this fabrication or reification. So I received teaching of the 6 texts by Nagarjuna from Sergon Tenshab Rinpoche, and I received also teaching on the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental treatise of the middle way by Nagarjuna from Kono Lama Rinpoche, Tenzin Gyaltsen. And so in his, during his teaching, he said that this last 2 lines where it says the emptiness puts an end to this reification. He says that it could be used, interpreted as an instrumental case or as So when you enter through the realization of emptiness, what happens is this reification kind of is said also to dissolve into it. So the grasping at some kind of true existence and things is said to kind of dissolve into that emptiness. So dissolving into emptiness. So it's which means that when you realize emptiness directly, then all these reifications kind of dissolve into the nature, the true nature of the mind itself, which is the empty nature of the mind itself, and not just emptiness of anything else. And so, by cultivating the antidote, the counterforce to the true grasping a true existence, we come to the point where this true grasping a true existence kind of dissolves into emptiness. And so, when you think along these lines, we can see that possibility of overcoming all the defilements by applying the antidote. Of course, bodhicitta, compassion, and so forth also helps, but the direct counterforce to these delusions and the defilements is this realization of emptiness, which goes directly counter to the grasping at true existence. And therefore, as I said, quoted the sutra, Rajapala Sutra, the Buddha led sentient beings through various means to understand emptiness. And therefore, we need to go through the stages of progression along this understanding of emptiness. First, understanding the rough idea of what selflessness means, and then from there going into the subtler ones, and then finally the subtlest understanding of emptiness. And so we have different reasonings that are used to establish our emptiness. So such as the Lama and the reasoning of dependent originations. Do you get something from this? Otherwise, when we talk about emptiness, then you would just think that, oh, there's something called emptiness, and nothing really happens. Sometimes people may think that, oh, these are something that Master Nagarjuna himself just made up. When he had really very much spare time, he must have written these books about emptiness. So these days we find many professors who write books which are actually come from others' words. And so people might also think that this is what Master Nagarjuna may have done. So that's not the case. So if you really think and reflect on the teachings, it really makes sense. So since about 30 or 40 years of age, I really began to think about emptiness. Since the age of 16, 17, sorry, with the help of one of my debate assistants, So understanding of emptiness is the best or the most profound tool to make some transformation within, using our mind and intelligence. So Master Tsongkhapa says that we need to ride the horse of, that our wisdom has to ride the horse of single-pointed concentration and then analyze the true how things exist thoroughly and come to the conclusion of how things really are, that they are devoid of any intrinsic existence. But of course I do not have that single-pointed concentration, but if you are able to concentrate on emptiness with the help of this single-pointed concentration, then you really will be able to see how it helps to reduce our grasping. So merely saying that we have to do so because it's said in the scriptures doesn't really make, will not make much change. So we need to give thought to it. Emptiness is very important. The view of emptiness. In the Heart Sutra also. So we'll go through chapter 9 of the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. The sage propounded all these branches of teachings for the sake of wisdom. So, of these 10 chapters in this of the 10 chapters in this text, beginning with the benefit of bodhicitta, the first chapter, down to the 8th chapter, which teaches the methods aspect of the practice, are meant for increasing the wisdom. So within the wisdom, there is the wisdom understanding the conventional things and wisdom of emptiness or ultimate reality or truth. So here we are dealing with the second type of wisdom, wisdom of the ultimate truth. So not only developing it, but in order for this wisdom to become an antidote to even the cognitive obscuration to complete knowledge, then if you do that, then your meditation on emptiness is said to be a meditation to fulfill the complete goal. So when you develop bodhicitta, of course what you need to also develop is this wish to overcome the cognitive obscurations. And therefore, with the help of this bodhicitta, your meditation on emptiness becomes, serves the purpose to fulfill the complete goal. And therefore it says those who wish to pacify suffering should generate wisdom. All the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha are meant for other sentient beings also. I mean, to lead all other sentient beings to the state that he has himself reached by developing with bodhicitta and the understanding of emptiness. And so all the teachings are meant for that purpose of leading all other sentient beings to the same goal that Buddha himself has reached. And therefore it says one should generate wisdom, those who wish to pacify suffering. So as I said, there are these two types of wisdom, wisdom understanding conventional things and wisdom understanding the ultimate truth. The conventional subjects, the 5 different subjects. And so we have medicine, art, and also spirituality. So not only remaining and understanding these different subjects, but also understanding how things really are, without giving in or without believing in the mere appearances. And therefore, we have the talk of the two truths, how things are and how they, what appearance is. So even the non-Buddhist traditions also talk about the two truths. Although in Christianity they do not use these terms, but basically they have this kind of idea that whatever like the God is ultimate, and then the creatures are conventional. The Lokayatas give 5 different reasons to prove that there is a primal factor, which is the source of everything. So what are they? Is there anybody who remembers? So they say one reason is that everything has a limit. So they say that without some creator or doer of these cannot happen. So by using some reason and logic, and then saying that there must be some designer, a doer of everything. So for example, if you look at our eyes, our body, we have all these internal organs, and how they work. They're very active. They're working inside us, and when we think about these, you may get the sense that if there is no designer of all these, how can they be here? So it's easier to say that everything is created by a creator God, or unless we go by the evolutionary theory. So maybe there are those things which are created, but that some things come through evolutionary process, Darwinian evolutionary process, in which the animals came into being is explained. Beginning with microbes, single-celled microbes, and then developing into multi-celled, and then becoming bigger and bigger, and then those with legs and heads and so forth, and then those who started walking instead of walking on using the 4 limbs, but just standing up and so forth. So there may be this evolutionary process also. So many of you do know. There are many lamas and geishis here, and then also many monastics, monks and nuns. In one of the sutras, it is said, after the Buddha's death, it is said that gradually this ocean will subside and diminish, and then humans will start living in the land of snows. So we cannot take that literally to mean that it refers to the whole of the land of snows. That's contradicting our own empirical experience. In the 1940s, we started building a hydroelectric power station in Shantideva, in nearby Lhasa. And during excavation process of the land, the people found slates covering some structure. And when the slate was removed very carefully, what they found was there was a kind of a coffin, and in which was a corpse. And with that corpse, a skeleton, along with it, some things that may have belonged to the person was also buried. And so through investigation, what they found was it was 3,000 years old. And so the Lhasa Valley itself, so it's quite clear from this that there were humans 3,000 years ago in Lhasa Valley. And then in Chamdo area in Kham, the archaeologists found skeletons and different objects. Some are 7,000 years old, some are 10,000 years. And in the upper western part of Tibet, these findings are like 10,000 years. And then in the Kham and Amda regions, there were also archaeological findings which were like 30,000 years old. And so it's quite clear from this that the quotation was a reference not to the whole of the land of snows, but Lhasa area perhaps. And so there used to be a sea or an ocean name called Otang Gitso in that area. And then some Chinese archaeologists came to the Lhasa area to do some excavation, and they found some stone, a fossil actually. And so the scientists later were able to conclude that the Lhasa area used to be under sea in the past with the trees in the banks of that and the shores, and then these trees got buried, and then they became fossils. So it's quite clear that up to the hills around Lhasa, there was a sea, and then that diminished, decreased, and then Zhetang and Loka areas, there were beings who also were perhaps from some kind of godly kind of race. And so, as we say, the Tibetan race came from the augur and monkey and the ogress. But we also need to put ourselves in perspective as well. And so this is just something that I was talking on the aside, but there is some point to it. And so regarding the 5 different reasons that the non-Buddhists were giving, somebody found some lines which mentions that things have some kind of a boundary or limit, and then they follow some kind of law and so forth. And so through these reasons, they say that things were created by some doer. So we were talking about the 2 truths earlier. So all the different traditions seem to be talking about the 2 truths. But in Buddhism, also we have the 2 truths. but the interpretation of the two truths are different according to the different philosophical schools, such as the Vaibhashikas. Say there's things that can be taken apart, and when they and lose their identity, they are said to be conventional, and those that don't lose their identity, even after some kind of analysis, are ultimate. And then the Sautantrikas say that whatever is functional is ultimate, and the others are conventional. And then the Madhyamakas say that emptiness is the ultimate truth, and then the rest of the phenomena are conventional. So the Buddha taught the Perfect Wisdom Sutras, which comprise the 100,000 verses, 25,000 verses, and the shorter version, 8,000 verses, and also 18,000 verses, and so forth. So there are many different Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So if we read them, we'll find mention of the different objects, beginning with form and so forth, and then leading to the resultant ultimate goal of enlightenment. And at the end of these, then it's said that all these are merely in name and do not have ultimate existence. And in the Heart Sutra, we find mention of the profound illumination, or where the profound here refers to emptiness, and appearance refers to the conventional things. So when it comes to talk about the suchness or the reality of interdependence, then what we understand is how to avoid the two extremes of nihilism and eternalism. So when we use the term things are dependently originated, for example, in the Mulya Madhyamaka Karika, it says that whatever is dependently originated is said to be empty, and that it is said to be designated, and therefore this is the middle path. So that this phrase, the appearance of the profound, refers to both the emptiness and the conventional realities. In the Chinese translation, it seems that term appearance is missing, according to what His Holiness was taught. So this means that one important element is missing in the Chinese translation. So you have to so in Chinese translation of the Heart Sutra, I also know that they do not have the term also, or even in the phrase where it says. So now they said this term appearance is there in the Chinese translation. So they contradict themselves. And so in the Heart Sutra translation of Chinese, this term even, where it says even the five aggregates are empty of intrinsic existence, is missing. And which actually, this term even is there in the original Sanskrit. there are two significances to it. One is that not only the self is empty of any intrinsic existence, but even the aggregates are empty of intrinsic existence. So it actually shows both the emptiness or selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena. So we're not only talking about the selflessness in terms of the absence of some kind of a self-sufficiently, substantially existent self. Because it says even the five aggregates are empty of intrinsic existence. And then the second significance may be that in the first sermon, during the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha gave his teaching where there's some kind of indication maybe that the different objects have some kind of defined characteristics of themselves. Persons, and in the teaching of the 12 links of dependent origination, the Buddha goes through the process of how someone enters samsara through these 12 links of dependent origination. And the reason, the purpose for this is for him to teach that there is no self. And in such teachings of the first Noble Truth and so forth, there is this teaching on selflessness, but these aggregates are not said to be selfless. But in the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma, the Perfection Wisdom Sutras, the Buddha goes through the teaching of selflessness of all the phenomena as being devoid of any independent existence. And then in the Heart Sutra, there is also mention of form is empty, the fourfold emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form is not other than emptiness, and emptiness also is not other than form. So, of course, we have memorized this text, and therefore, when we recite, it doesn't give much sense to us, perhaps. But when you actually relate this phrase to yourself, saying, I am empty, emptiness is me, and here we are not using... when you use the reasoning called lack of one and many, you come to the conclusion of the self being empty of any intrinsic existence. You cannot say that. I mean, you cannot maybe relate this to this kind of a phrase, saying emptiness is me. But when you understand that whatever is dependently arisen is said to be empty. If you understand that those lines well, then when you check into the form, and what you find is that you cannot find any objectivity in it, because it is dependent, and therefore it's devoid of any independent existence, and therefore, since it's devoid of any independent existence, therefore, and it's empty, and therefore its dependence is possible, feasible. So merely because of the designation that I exist, and therefore I do not have any intrinsic existence, therefore you can say I am empty. And therefore, since I am also empty of any intrinsic existence, and because of that, it's feasible for me to exist through a dependence, and therefore you can say emptiness is me. And this is also, as the Heart Sutra says, likewise, the other things are empty. Like feelings, perceptions, and so forth are empty. So since things are dependently designated, therefore it's feasible to say that they are empty of intrinsic existence. If they do not depend on any other factor, then we cannot talk about causes and effects having this causal relationship. That effects do not depend on its causes and so forth. Cannot be talked about. What happens to us is that things appear in a certain fashion, and because of this appearance, we become attached or averse. But when you are told that there's nothing there to which you are nothing objective in the things that you're attached or that you feel aversion to, and objectively nothing is there, then it helps to reduce this attachment and aversion. So there are the negative emotions which arise on the basis of the clinging or grasping at some true existence and things, whereas there are others which are concomitant with the other delusions or afflictive emotions which are concomitant with this grasping. So the subtle attachment and aversion go together with this grasping. And so these two teachings of the Buddha, but the teaching on emptiness and Bodhisattva, which holds others more dearer than oneself, these can be proved through reason and not merely based on basing ourselves on blind faith. So the second verse says conventional and ultimate, these are accepted two truths. The ultimate is not the object of mind. The mind is spoken of as conventional. So according to Kuno Lama Rinpoche, he says the two terms for mind that come up in this text, one here and then the other one comes later when we relate to yogis. So the two terms in Sanskrit are different. So the ultimate is not the object of mind, means mind which is dualistic. The object of that dualistic mind, ultimate is not the object of dualistic mind. So this ultimate truth is something that we have to find through investigation into the designated object, what it is. And so what we find is that things do not exist the way they appear to us, and therefore they do not have any objective independent existence. And so emptiness is not the object of a dualistic mind which looks at this appearance only. So what exists without us doing any kind of analysis into things is conventional. But what you find through this kind of critical analysis into the nature of things is ultimate. So maybe we should, because some people are already going to the toilet, we'll have 15 minutes break. So the world is comprised the beings and the habitats. So with regard to living, the beings living in it, so on this earth, for example, we have 7 billion people. And so amongst them, there are two types, it says, yogis and common people. So the yogis, so the term for yogis in Tibetan is Neljur Pa. Nel has the meaning of, Nel refers to being right and correct, and Jorba means to link to it, so which means linking to the connecting to the right meaning. And so in the world we have people who do not do any kind of analysis into the matter and things. And then there are those who do this analysis. So from this perspective, we can say the scientists are yogis, so to say, and then those who are just satisfied with the way we live, usually, without doing any kind of analysis, just like animals, checking how things come about and whether they are doers or creators or not, and so forth. And so scientists do not stay only on that level, but do analysis into things, how things exist. In order to know how things exist, they do analysis. And then accordingly, what they find, they use in their practice. And so we can talk about yogis and common people in terms of scientists and those who are just common people, not doing any kind of analysis. And then here, the yogis are those who are following some kind of philosophical school. So within the yogis, we have the Siddhamatras, for example, who say that, who asserts the non-duality of subject and object. And then those who assert that things are like illusion. So even in the world, when scientists explain things from their quantum physics point of view, they have different ideas and understandings than the common people. So in the 1950s, when we came into exile, this world had 6 billion people. Now, so each of these 6 billion people have different perceptions. And so not living only at the appearance level, but doing deeper investigation and accordingly saying, explaining things are one type of yogis like scientists. And it says the world of common people are undermined by the world of the yogis. And through difference in their intelligence, yogis too are undermined by the higher ones. So within the yogis, for example, there are the Madhyamakas and Chittamatras. So, whereas the Chittamatra say that the things have no dualistic existence, but then they posit the mind to be truly existent, and whereas Madhyamakas reject that through reason and through their analysis. And then within the higher types of yogis also, though there are those who have reached the path of seeing, and then there are those who have reached the nirvana. So according to the Sankhika Madhyamakas, there are the defilements which have to be overcome through the path of meditation, and also the defilements which have to be overcome through the path of seeing. And so these yogis also have a difference according to their intelligence and insight. So here, yogis who are undermined by the higher ones has to be understood in terms of these yogis using logic and reasoning to disprove others' positions and assertions. And therefore, in the text it says, a thesis is proved by examples accepted by both. Unanalyzed, practitioners train for the result. So things are not posited from the point of view of accepting that there is some objective existence through analysis, but that they are merely designated by name and conception. The world sees things and conceives them to be truly existent. So, making a division between yogis and common people, there is a kind of a disagreement between the two. And so it says the world sees things as and conceive them to be truly existent, not like an illusion, just as those yogis do. In this regard, there is dispute between the yogis and the world. And so the yogis are show the shortcomings of the worldly people's views. And then it goes on to say, refuting the realists in general, even direct perceptions of form and so forth only view conventionalities are not valid cognitions. So it says, so accepting things in convention means that the conventional existence have to be proved or accepted because of the reason, the three criteria, that they are conventionally renowned, and then that other conventional cognitions do not undermine them, and then the ultimate analysis into the ultimate nature of things also do not undermine them. And so according to the Prasthambhika Madhyamakas, they say that our perceptions are mistaken because of the appearance, there being the appearance of true existence to them. And because of this, there is the dispute between the Prasangika Madhyamakas and also the Savatantrika Madhyamakas. So it says form and so forth are false, like worldly acceptance, that And even direct perceptions and form and so forth only view conventionalities and not valid cognitions. So although our body is unclean, still, because of the appearance and so forth, we have this notion of cleanliness of the body as well. And so it says, form and so on, or false like worldly acceptance of that, what is that which is unclean and so forth as clean and the like. So we have these four conceptions of clean things which are unclean being clean, and things which are impermanent as being permanent, and things which are empty as being called not empty, and things which are selfless as being self, having self. So for the sake of letting the world enter into the reality, the guardian taught about things. So the Buddha has said that everything that is compounded or composed are impermanent. So if you analyze the things which we say to be assert as being impermanent, even within that impermanent thing, if you were to analyze, you cannot find anything as being that object. In the ultimate sense, however, they are not momentary. So that's that if you check into the moments of each things, you cannot find anything as being this and that. So, but that is also contradictory conventionally. So within the Madhyamakas, there are those who assert some objective existence in things, and those who reject objective existence whatsoever. So there is also this the postulation of correct and incorrect or conventional things from the point of view of the worldly perception. So we see that things that change momentarily are impermanent. But we still say, oh, this thing was there in the past, a century ago, and it's still here. So the conventions of yogis has no fault. Otherwise, their discernment of the uncleanness of the other would be undermined by the world. So from the illusion-like victorious ones, positive forces arise. So how is it possible that if things are illusion-like, that we can create positive forces or the merits, and also create negative actions? So just as for those believing in true things, but if sentient beings were like an illusion, then how could he take rebirth once having died? So these questions arise from the when people believe in some kind of objective, independent existence and things. And so it is quite clear that there is an appearance and how things exist as well. And so if you assert some objective existence in things, then that would be undermined by reason and logic. And so things can only be posited in terms of how they exist conventionally, and accordingly we can talk about good, bad, and so forth, only in conventional, in convention, so long as conditions are gathered together. the illusion lasts that long. And how could a sentient being be truly existent merely because his continuum lasts long? Verse number 11. So these questions that are raised in these verses come because of thinking that if things were like illusion, how can these happen? So in Master Nagarjuna's 24th chapter of Mula Madhyamaka Karika, he goes through these realist positions and how the realists object to the Madhyamakas who assert non-intrinsic existence in things. So they say that if things were empty, that they do not have any intrinsic existence, then the good, bad, and Four Noble Truths and so forth do not exist, cannot exist. And so in response to their critique, Master Nagarjuna says, and actually turns the argument around and says that if things were to have any intrinsic existence, then what you actually criticize me are actually befall you. So you do not, this is because you do not understand the meaning of emptiness, you do not know the nature of emptiness or identity, and you do not know the purpose of emptiness. So with regard to these afflictive emotions, so as I've already explained, due to our grasping at some kind of true existence, objective existence in things, we tend to have attachment and aversion to things. And so until you are able to destroy all objectification things, you will not be able to overcome all these afflictive emotions at all. Because so long as some objectivity is left, then still there will be negative emotions arising on that basis. And therefore, the Madhyamakas who posit some objective existence in things say that there is an appearance of things, and therefore, just as they appear, they should have that kind of existence. And then still, for them, there is some objectification left. So when you say that things appear to us in a certain fashion, and they do have that kind of existence as well, you're still left with some objectification. You have to destroy all objectification, because even if a subtle objectification is left, there's going to be these negative emotions of attachment and anger arising within you. So when we talk about the destroying all reification and objectification, we are not denying the existence of things as such, and we are not being nihilist. And therefore, the Prasankika Madhyamakas are able to say that although things do not have any objective existence, but they are merely designated. So the purpose of the emptiness is to get rid of this objectification in things. Because even if a subtle one is left, you still will have attachment and aversion. And so when you realize emptiness in your mind, of course, the conventional things disappear. So, as the seventh Dalai Lama says, all these appearances and experiences kind of dissolve within that realization of emptiness. So when you come to the conclusion that this self, the I, do not exist inherently, and you realize emptiness there is no objectification of the I, and therefore, the person, when you think about yourself as the person, do not exist in any way objectively. And so we can say that the person is designated. So even when we start studying logic, right from the beginning, we learn about these things being designated or imputed and substantially existent things and so forth. And then we say that a person is a phenomena which is called non-associated compounded phenomena. And if you do not give any thought to these, of course, you'll take them for granted. Sorry. So if you only are satisfied with the appearance of things and say that just as they appear, they should have that kind of existence, then however much you may meditate on emptiness, which are concluded according to the Chittamatra and the Savattantrika Madhyamakas point of view, you are still left with some objectification in things. And so we need to destroy all objectification. And so when you realize emptiness, having destroyed all objectification, what is left in your mind, in your perception, is this mere negation of true existence. And then Master Nagarjuna also says that whatever is dependent is said to be... it also says that whatever is dependent and arisen is said to be empty, and that is said to be designated, and that is the middle way. And there's nothing which is not dependent, therefore there's nothing which is not empty. And so before doing any kind of practice, for example, deity yoga practice, you should use these two verses from the Mula Madhyamaka Karika and meditate on emptiness. And you should be able to focus your mind completely on these two verses and the meaning of these two verses. So otherwise, without understanding emptiness, well, you will not be able to do the deity yoga practices correctly. If you think that I do not exist just like that, I mean, that's nihilism. Nihilistic view. So since sentient beings have been there since time beginningless for a long time, just because of the long duration, if you were to say that they should have some true existence, so long as conditions are gathered, the illusion also lasts. So in muttering and so forth, of an illusory person, there is no negativity, since it has no mind. So because an illusion, magical illusion, a person that appears in magical illusion does not have any feeling, sensation. Therefore, killing such a magical illusion will not accrue any negative action. But because the sentient beings have the mind and their sensation, therefore positive and negative forces accrue. So we should also be able to converse with other people who follow other traditions, such as Jainism and so forth, not leaving the things just as it is mentioned in our text. So the last year I met one Hindu teacher and Swami in his ashram in Mathura, and he even knew Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika. He was able to recite verses from it, and really good scholar. So magical illusion, horses and cows and so forth, elephants and so forth, in a magical illusion are inanimate. But all those ancient beings are like illusion, they still have the mind, and so we have perceptions of visual forms and so forth, and also we can see different pictures on television. So as we look at the pictures, there is going to be the consciousness on perceiving those pictures. As the pictures move along, the consciousness of each moment of the picture also changes. So visual consciousness is dependent on the visual objects, and auditory consciousness is dependent on the sound and so forth. As soon as the visual form and so forth is not there, or they cease, the visual consciousness and so forth do not arise. But therefore we can see changes happening in them. Why do this change happen? Just as the external matters change momentarily because of having come through from their causes, likewise, the consciousness also each moment of consciousness are given rise to by the previous moment of consciousness, and therefore they change. And so both the matter, external things as well as consciousness, have what is known as substantial cause, which means that that very cause actually turns or transforms into the effect. And so, for example, to make a pot, we need a clay. So the clay becomes the substantial cause, and then the potter's hands and the other the instruments and so forth are the cooperating factors. And so, the particles of our hands, for example, were there. The continuum were there even at the time of Big Bang, and even before that, before the Big Bang, there was empty space. And so the substantial cause of our hand, when it comes to the particles, were there even at that time. And so the 400 verses of Aryadeva says we cannot posit a beginning to these things. So maybe they can come to an end, but there's no beginning from that point of view. But particular very specific things can come about through causes and conditions temporarily, and then they can cease. And so for consciousness, you need to have an immediately preceding condition, which cannot be a matter. So the consciousness has to come from a compatible cause, which has this kind of nature, which is not immaterial. So the consciousness cannot be a substantial cause for matter, and vice versa. So this is natural law. So as soon as someone conceives in a womb of a mother, that consciousness at the time of conception has to have a substantial cause. Of course, certain schools of thought say that there is a soul, but not Buddhism. But even with regard to a self, you have to posit the self on the basis of the object of, or the basis of designation, the psychophysical aggregates, and you have to see whether a self has a beginning or not by checking whether these factors have a beginning or not. And so a self is finally designated on the basis of the continuity of a mind. And if you check whether this continuity of the mind has a beginning or not, of course not. So verse number 12 read. And then verse number 13, if ultimately someone is released in nirvana and conventionally is circling in samsara, then the Buddha as well would be circling in samsara. What use would there be for Bodhisattva conduct? So there are 4 types of nirvana that is mentioned in the text. Emptiness is said to be the natural nirvana, which we related earlier in relation to the verse from Master Nagarjuna's text, where it says the reifications and so forth dissolve within is emptiness. So because of this in emptiness, on the basis of which we can talk about eliminating all the possibility of overcoming all delusions, because the delusions are adventitious and therefore not in the nature of the mind. And therefore, it's possible to attain the nirvana, which is attained through that realization, and it's called Lobrunyangde. So this is a question raised by others, verse number 13, and then in response to that, even in illusion cannot be turned back unless the continuity of its conditions has ceased. So since the delusions can be overcome by applying the antidote, the realization of emptiness, we are not saying that just because things are empty of intrinsic existence, which is said to be the natural natural nirvana, that we are released from samsara. But because of this possibility of overcoming all the delusions through the application of the antidote, realization of emptiness, then we say we can attain this release from samsara. Yet when continuity of those conditions cease, it does not arise even conventionally. And then next is refuting the Chittamatrans. So in the Madhyamaka Avatara, there is this refutation of a birth from another, and Master Chandrakirti refutes that, and the Chittamatrans say that there's no need to reject that, because things do arise from others. And then the Sotantikas, for example, say that when some consciousness, a visual consciousness arises, they arise in relation to an object, a visual object, and because of their being the visual object, there is the visual conception, perception as well. Therefore, they must exist objectively. So a consciousness arises with an aspect of the image of the object that it perceives. And then within the Chittamatrans, there are those who assert that the same number, a corresponding number of consciousnesses arise in corresponding to the number of objects. For example, a mottled object, a multicolored object is seen, and then whatever number of colors there are or the patterns there are, a similar number of consciousnesses arise. And then there are those who say that although there may be many different patterns, colors, and so forth, but the consciousness is only one. So a multicolored object is seen by a single consciousness which perceives the whole thing. And then there is also an assertion on a philosophical school which says that it's half-half, like they are called half-agists. And so in certain Chittamatra texts, like the 20 verses or 30 verses and so forth, even when you get down to the smallest particle, there is nothing which you can say as being partless. So when you go still further, there's nothing which can be posited as being partless. And therefore, the Chittamatras say that because their things cannot be partless, partless particles and so forth cannot exist, therefore there is no external existence at all. Whereas the Madhyamakas say that although things do have external existence, they still are devoid of any objective independent existence. So we have all kinds of perceptions, and accordingly the different perceptions arise in accordance with the different objects which form their image on the consciousness. And so these varieties of things gain their existence because of the manifestation of the imprints of them that are left in our mind, manifesting as this and that object. For us, of course, some visual form and a visual perception seem to be two different things. But the Chittamatrans say that they are of the same nature, same essence, because of that imprint manifesting in the form of those objects and the consciousness. So, when even the deceptive awareness doesn't exist, by what is the illusion perceived? So why do we have this appearance of the external things? So the Chittamatrans say that there is no external thing. But the perception or the cognition itself do have a true existence. So the object and then the perception which sees it, to which the object seems to have some external existence. But although we get the notion that the thing out there exists as if it's a referent of some term externally, but Chittamata say that such a way of existence is not there. And so that is merely a mere imputation. And therefore, they go through the three natures, dependent nature, such as the object which is seen by our visual perception, and then this externality in the thing is mere imputation, and that the dependent is devoid of that the externality, that imputed nature is the ultimate nature. So for you, if the illusion itself does not exist, then what is being perceived? In actuality, it exists as something else, the aspect of which is the very mind itself. So this is the answer. When mind itself is like an illusion, then what is being seen by what? So although things do have, Chittamatra say that although things do appear to have some external existence, but these things have arisen from an imprint, from one imprint, which also gives rise to the perception. Therefore, the perception and the perceived object are of the same nature. And so the Madhyamaka said when mind itself is like an illusion, then what is being seen by what? So if both the perceived object and the perception itself arise from the same thing, then how do you make this difference between the perceived and the perception? So they cannot be, the object and the subject of mind cannot be one. So the guardian of the world, in fact, said, mind cannot see mind, just as the edge of a sword cannot cut itself, so it is with the mind. And then the Chittamatrans would reply by saying, but it is just like the way a flame perfectly illuminates its own characteristics. And the response to this, that is, the flame of a lamp is not being illuminated, since darkness does not obscure darkness. So for an intrinsic blue to be blue, it does not depend on something else, as does a crystal. So for something else to appear as blue, it depends on another thing. So if something were to be intrinsically blue without depending on any other factor, then it cannot be dependent. And so we see some of that depend on others and some that do not. There is no self-created blue, which is dependence void blue. So verse 22 read. So these are raising also the questions about self-cognizing awareness. So when Patanjika Madhyamakas say that things are merely interdependent, object and subject are mutually dependent, action and actor are mutually dependent, and then the object acted upon and the actor and the action are all interrelated, and so everything is like that. Yeah. So apart from that, if things were to have any objective existence, if you assert through philosophical views, so whether it's internal experiences or external things like visual forms and so forth, if the reason that they exist is whether they have there is a valid cognition which sees it. And so the other traditions, other philosophical traditions say that things do have some objective existence, or so they said something to be existent and has to be seen by a valid cognition. And then for the valid cognition itself, when they are pressed, how do you posit that it exists? Then there are those philosophical schools which assert an apperception or self-cognition, which is said to see the perception itself. So they use that valid cognition in general is what gives identity to the existence and to other existence, and the valid cognition itself, for its own existence, they use the reason that because of self-cognition, there is valid cognition. So they say that there is a self-cognition. Now here, the Madhyamakas reject that self-cognizant mind. So when a visual perception sees a visual form, you can still, after that, you can have the memory, or you can have the memory of seeing a form. And so later on, when you say, oh, I saw a form, that same memory also is perceiving the perception which has seen that form. So because of the experience that you had of seeing the form, you will also be able to have able to recall that consciousness or the perception which has seen the form. So there is no need for a third consciousness or a third factor like self-cognizant mind to say that there is a consciousness. So when you have a memory of something, seeing or experiencing something, that memory also remembers both the object and the subjective mind. Verse number 24, right? So, the Prasangika Madhyamakas say that both the object and the subjective mind that sees it are mutually dependent. So even animals are aware of how certain effects are dependent on their causes. So a cause is said to be that which helps, and this has to be established in relation to what it helps to bring about, the effect. So although at the time of the cause itself, the effect has not yet arisen, but the cause is said to help bring about that effect. And so in relation to that effect, the cause is to be its cause. And when the result or the effect has arisen, the cause is no more there. But we can still say this effect was brought about by that cause, although the cause is no more there at the time of the effect itself. So if you were to posit some cause without relating to an effect, there's no effect when the cause is there. And when the effect arises, the cause is no more there. So if they were to have any objective independent existence, then they cannot have that kind of relationship, causal relation. A man cannot be a father without a son or a child. I cannot be a father because I do not have a child. So as a child comes, then a man becomes a father. So so before the child comes, there is no father. But as soon as the child comes, the father, the producer, is not there. So if you really go into details like that, then it's complicated, isn't it? So to posit that things have some independent existence is quite complicated and quite problematic. And therefore, to posit that, to say that things are related, interconnected, makes sense. And therefore, saying that the things are merely in name, merely, although despite being merely designated, then we can also talk about conventionalities of things on the basis of saying that they are renowned in convention, that the other conventional cognition cannot undermine them, and then so, for example, in the case of scientific findings, when one scientist says this something exists in this way or that way, they do not accept right away. But when the other scientists also, through their own experiment and investigation, find the same thing, then it's said to be they come to a consensus. And so this is how scientific findings are established. And things are established through scientific experiment. And so similarly, we say something to be exist must fulfill these three criteria, that they are conventionally renowned as conventional existence, and that the other conventional cognitions cannot undermine it, and then also the ultimate analysis cannot undermine them. Those which are seen, heard, and known are not to be negated. Here, the conception of true existence, which is the cause of suffering, is to be rejected. So in the Heart Sutra, where it says there is no form, no sound, and so forth, no eye, no ear, no nose, so forth. If by saying this we say that these do not exist, the eye, ear, and so forth do not exist, then it's quite daring on our part. So we do eat meals, drink tea, and so forth. So we do not deny ourselves, existence of ourselves. So to say that nose, eyes, and so forth do not exist, even in convention, is nihilism. And therefore, the two truths are said to be of same essence, essentially same. And therefore, we can say, for I am empty, emptiness is me, emptiness is not other than me, and me, I too am not other than emptiness. This fourfold emptiness can be applied to anything. So there are two truths to be understood. On the one hand, we have the conventional truth, which is left without doing any kind of analysis into them. And so each and every phenomena, everything holds these two natures, or two natures of two truths. So it's very a great to say that things are merely designated. An Indian friend of mine, a scientist, a physicist, as a nuclear physicist, Raja Ramana, told me that quantum physics in modern world is something new, whereas in India, over 2,000 years ago, we have already founded this concept. So he was a nuclear physicist, and as an Indian, he was proud to say that in India we already found this concept of quantum physics 2,000 years ago. And so what this shows is that things cannot be found if you objectively, if you do analyze them. So if you say that things cannot be found, since things cannot be found through analysis, if you say that, oh, there's nothing, then people will laugh at you. And in that case, you do not also need to take food when you are hungry. Trungpa has also said that, of course, my hand is empty of intrinsic existence, the fire is empty, and the action of burning is also empty of intrinsic existence. But if you put your hand in fire, it will burn still. And so, in Heart Sutra it says form is empty. The emptiness is said to be the property of that form itself and not the property of everything else. And so the emptiness of form and form are essentially of the same one essence or nature. And so you can apply this to anything, like happiness is empty, emptiness is happiness, and so forth. Otherwise, without understanding the relative nature of things, when you say that there's no eye, no nose, no ear, and so forth, you might find it quite strange. And so there were two Amdo persons. One knew the Heart Sutra by heart and recited it in front of the other who didn't know it by heart. And then at the end, the second person said, you didn't have to say no eye, no nose, no ear, and so forth. You could have just said there's no head. And so when you think, give thought to these passages in the Heart Sutra, and then later on you find mentioned that all the Buddhas of the three times also have become awakened through this perfection of wisdom. Makes sense as well. And so how do you proceed to that enlightenment of Buddhahood? And then the Heart Sutra gives the mantra of Gate Gate, which shows the progression along the path. And so you first enter the path of accumulation, and then the path of preparation, and then the path of seeing, path of meditation, and finally Bodhi. So from beginning with our own initial practices and then entering into the path, we will reach that goal of enlightenment. And so the Heart Sutra shows us the whole range of path leading to Buddhahood. So otherwise, just reading it, say that there is no I, no ear, and so forth, without understanding it, there's no way you can make progress. Of course, you may chant with a nice tune. So there is no form, no sound, and so forth, as well as no eye, no ear, and so forth. Why are these said in the Heart Sutra? What happens to us is that we things do appear to have some kind of true existence in them, and accordingly we become attached and cling to them as well. So in order to get rid of that kind of misconception of true existence, emptiness is taught. So it says here, the conception of true existence, which is the cause of suffering, is to be rejected. The illusion is not separate from the mind. Despite being inseparable, it is still impermanent. If it were a thing, how could it be different, not be different? And if it is not different, it could not be a thing. So a perception which sees an illusion, magical illusion, also are like illusion, is like illusion, and also the things which we see with our mind are like illusion. So although the illusion is not truly existent, it is still an object of view. So is it for the viewer. But samsara must have a thing as its support, otherwise it would be like space. So in beginning with our study of the collected views, the logic primer, we talk about a person being imputed, and then the aggregates being substantial, and so forth. So we have to think about these things. So samsara must have a thing as its support, meaning that there must be something substantial which can actually be the basis of samsara. Otherwise, it would be like space with nothing. How could a non-thing supported by a truly existent thing come to have a function? So, in one of text of Master Tsongkhapa, it says that if things were to have any intrinsic existence, then any kind of intrinsic existence, then how could nirvana happen, be possible? The mind, you asserted, would be something existing alone, accompanied by nothing. And if the mind is free of apprehension, then everyone would be a Tathagata. So the purpose of meditation on emptiness is to get rid of our misconceptions. So if there is only the mind, then that cannot be done. And if the mind is free from apprehension, then everyone would be a Tathagata. And if there were a case, if that were the case, what benefit would there be in analyzing mind only? Even upon knowing the illusion, like, how do afflictions gotten rid of? Get rid of? Since lust for an illusory woman can arise even in the one who conjured her up. So, by understanding that things are like illusion, it helps to reduce our apprehension or clinging to some kind of true existence in things. So emptiness itself is said to be devoid of any intrinsic existence or true existence. So there is danger that, having said that everything is empty of any intrinsic existence, some people might think that if everything is empty, but what about emptiness itself? Can it be truly existent? And therefore, it is said, the Buddha says that emptiness itself is empty. So we talk about emptiness of emptiness. So of the 16 or 20 different emptinesses propounded in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, there are 4 which are actually, which have to do with emptiness of emptiness itself. Verse number 33 says, through not finding the object of investigation. So when you do analysis into the nature of things, you will not be able to pinpoint anything as being this or that, having any kind of objective existence at all. The non-existence of that thing is claimed. Thus, how can the emptiness, whose base is empty, stand in front of the mind? So for those who are of sharper faculty, intelligence, they first check what nirvana or enlightenment is through reason. And so having understood the emptiness, then through their own reasoning and established the enlightenment through that understanding, then they develop this wish or aspiration to become enlightened for the sake of others. So as Madhyamaka Alamkara mentions, so when you listen to some teachings of study a text, you first check whether it has what subject matter it deals with, and then what is the purpose or the goal of these dealing with this subject matter, and the temporary goal as well as the ultimate goal, and then Sput-Arth commentary on Abhisamaya Alamkara says that those with sharper faculty would actually check whether there is a content, the subject matter of in the Abhisamaya Alamkara itself or not. They will check whether there is a purpose of this text or not. And so they do this kind of critical analysis through reasoning by using their intelligence. And then by understanding emptiness and first doing analysis into the nature of things, and then gaining some understanding, and then realizing emptiness, they will see that nirvana is possible. And so then they would also work to think of liberating other sentient beings. And the great compassion, with great compassion, they wish others to they wish to work to liberate other sentient beings. In order for that to happen, of course, they must see the possibility to possibility of ending this suffering, without which they cannot aspire to that highest liberation for the sake of others. So all these different negative emotions, suffering and so forth are rooted in, are seen to be rooted in this ignorance, clinging to or grasping at some true existence and things. So not only leaving it at just faith and belief, but by understanding this possibility of nirvana through the understanding of emptiness, then these practitioners of Mahayana would have the courage to, the resolution and determination to save or liberate other sentient beings. And then they aspire to become enlightened, and then on the basis of that, they cultivate bodhicitta. And once they develop this bodhicitta, genuine bodhicitta within themselves, they become bodhisattva, and then they are on the understanding, based on the understanding of emptiness that they already have, they would progress along the path of preparation by when they gain this insight into emptiness through the power of their meditation, meditatively gain this vipassana into this emptiness. Then they enter the path of preparation, and then when after that, when they see the emptiness directly, they enter the path of seeing, and then they progress along the path of meditation, and finally become Buddha. So although a Buddha is fully enlightened, where both the meditation, the meditative nature, and the post-meditation meditative nature of the mind are kind of merged. So along with the mind, there is the subtle wind energy. And therefore, on the basis of the mind, the subtlest mind and the subtlest energy, which is mentioned in Tantra, then they are able to serve others effortlessly. So just as a wish-fulfilling gem and a wish-granting tree fulfill all wishes, likewise through the power of the prayers, the enlightened body of a victor appears to the disciples. For example, when a Garuda healer who empowered a healing Khan has passed away, that Khan can pacify poison and the like long after the healer's death. Similarly, when the Bodhisattva has passed into Nirvana after setting up the reliquary of a victor by conforming to the Bodhisattva's conduct, he still performs all deeds. And then liberation occurs through seeing the truth on page 8. Establishing that the wisdom of emptiness is ultimately the true path, even to those who seek mere liberation. So here down comes the argument for Mahayana being the teaching of the Buddha as well. So the question that is raised here is, liberation occurs through seeing the truth. What is the use of seeing emptiness? Why? Because in scriptures it is proclaimed that without this path there is no enlightenment. So, in order to reach liberation, nirvana itself, one can meditate on the selflessness of persons. So, by meditating on emptiness and applying that antidote to the grasping at self, then you can eliminate that grasping. And then, not only that, all other phenomena such as our body and so forth are also must also be realized as being empty of self. But Mahayana is not. Why? Because in scriptures it is proclaimed that without this there is no enlightenment. In the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, it said that one must realize everything being empty of any intrinsic existence. Even those who are training on the path of for the path of the Shravakas or Bhattyaka Buddhas, and also the Mahayana path, must train in this understanding of emptiness. And then another question is but Mahayana is not established. saying that Mahayana, there is no source or no authentication of Mahayana being teaching of the Buddha. Well, how can your scripture be established? So these could be taken as those who accept Buddha, Buddhist, who accept that the Four Noble Truths. And with regard to, in connection with these, the Four Noble Truths, the truth of cessation, it cannot be understood only by resorting to scriptural authority. So since those who do not, who reject Mahayana teachings being the teaching of the Buddha, do accept some scripture of being the Buddha's words. So you have to use logic and reason, and then also the meaning of the scriptures, and because they are established for both parties. So when you reflect on the teachings, you can see that there is some, actually it can make some change within you. And so the Four Noble Truths and their 16 attributes, not leaving it only as a teaching, saying that it's the teaching of the Buddha, but by understanding, someone who is able to understand that we all want happiness and not suffering, could actually use our intelligence to think about these. So within the teaching of the Buddha, there are those teachings which show the very subtle selflessness, and also that nature of the mind being the clear light. And this salutation verse from Brahmana Samuccaya is very profound. It says, you have become an authority and you have this wish to benefit others. You are the savior and teacher, savior, and Sugata. So the Buddha is said to be an authoritative person for teaching the Four Noble Truths, and then on the basis of which he taught from his own experience, and therefore he becomes the unexcelled teacher, unexcelled savior, and Sugata, and so forth. And so the Prajnaparamita Sutras and so forth, which are Mahayana teachings, Mahayana Sutras, are beneficial to sentient beings, people, and also those who have some intelligence are able to see these as being very profound teachings. And not only that, when they apply these teachings in their life, they see the effect of reducing, these teachings having the effect of reducing their negative emotions. And so through this, one can also infer that if one is able to overcome these the very obvious negative emotions that are within us, then it's also possible to overcome the subtler negative emotions and also the stains left by them as well. Because they are established both parties, they were not established as valid at the outset. Any criterion that would give confidence in them would apply equally to the Mahayana. If acceptance by two different parties makes something true, then the Vedas and so forth also become true. But it is because the Mahayana is disputed. Since the scripture is disputed by non-Buddhists and some other sections of the scripture are disputed by yourselves and others, then they would have to be discarded too. So we have to use reason to come to the conclusions of these teachings, and not merely by following some words. And so while the bhikshus are the foundation of the teaching, it is hard to posit the bhikshus. So as long as we are left with some objectification of things, there will still be the negative emotions like attachment and aversion. So as I said earlier, so without understanding this, you will not be able to reduce the anger and attachment. So by meditating on the selflessness or emptiness posited by Chitta Mantra, it may help us to reduce attachment and aversion in relation to things outside of us, but not the aversion or negative emotions within. Because there is still this the attachment to the experiences that are within ourselves. So, from a Madhyamika point of view, both the external and internal phenomena are devoid of any true existence. However, those Madhyamikas who assert some objectivity in things, they are still left with some objectification in them. So it is hard to posit the bhikshus. For those minds with objects, it is hard to transcend the sorrow. But they are liberated as they eliminate afflictions. So we made division of within the negative emotions of those of gross and those of subtle negative emotions. So by realizing this gross or coarser level of selflessness, we may be able to kind of suppress the active negative emotions, but the subtle ones still will not be eliminated. So those who have this kind of coarser level of understanding of selflessness may be able to help themselves with the attachment and so forth, which arises through the clinging to some kind of substantially self-sufficient self. Although they may not have this kind of clinging to which arise through this grosser level of the self, but still the subtle emotions which arise to the subtler clinging to selfhood arise in them. So even if you may not have the negative emotions which arise on the basis of this coarser level of this grasping at self, but still there will be, you will have the negative emotions that are dependent on the subtle clinging to self. Because of there being some sense or feeling and sensation, and on the basis of which there will be this clinging to or grasping at the experiences. And accordingly, there will also be aversion and attachment based on that. So that liberation must occur immediately. Despite their lacking afflictions, they still have the karmic potential. But it is definite that they do not have craving for obtaining rebirth. Even if this craving is not afflictive, why is it not in like ignorance? So we need to give thought to these lines, and through the force of feeling there is craving, and the feeling exists in them as well. A mind having an object is what some have. For a mind that is parted from emptiness, what is subsided will arise again, like the meditative equipoise of non-discrimination, therefore meditation on emptiness, meditate on emptiness, and so forth. So being under the sway of our grasping at true existence, we create karma, and then accordingly we become attached to averse, and then we create karma. Verse number 52. So when you understand ignorance thoroughly, and then those sentient beings who are under the sway of this ignorance, and you cultivate or develop compassion towards them, but without any attachment. And so it says, as it is said in the heart of the middle way, once you see the fault, there is no attachment to samsara. So Shravaka arahats who have attained nirvana, they are fallen in the extreme of nirvana. So one who is free from these two extremes of nirvana and samsara, the fruit of emptiness is this: while being freed from the extremes of attachment and fear, one is able to remain in samsara for the sake of those who suffer due to ignorance. So because of compassion, these bodhisattvas are not, they do not fall in the extreme of nirvana, and that compassion in turn is helped by their understanding of emptiness as well. And so they have compassion towards sentient beings who are under the sway of the karma and delusions. And so to be able to remain in the middle without falling into the extremes of samsara or nirvana is this is possible because of understanding the emptiness or the suchness of dependent origination. As this is the case, disputation against emptiness is improper. Therefore, without indecision, please meditate on emptiness. So by seeing the qualities that you can develop, you'll develop belief or faith, and then that in turn gives rise to aspiration to engage in the path. You will pursue the path, and then you will put effort, and then through that effort you will realize the goal. And so therefore, without indecision, it says, please meditate on emptiness. Emptiness is the remedy of the darkness of afflictive and cognitive obscurations. So the realization of emptiness is the antidote to uproot all negative emotions and their imprints. And then there's a cognitive obscuration, which is the residual stain left by negative emotions, without overcoming which you cannot attain omniscience, that knowing everything as it is. So of course you don't have to go through learning each and everything that is knowable. So as long as there is this defilement in your mind which obscures it from knowing everything, you will not know everything, you will not have omniscience. But once you overcome that, then you will be able to see the two truths directly, simultaneously. And therefore, understanding of emptiness, wisdom of emptiness is the only factor, agent, which overcomes the negative emotions and these cognitive obscurations. And so, with the goal of attaining enlightenment of Buddhahood or omniscient state, if you meditate on emptiness, you are doing meditation on emptiness, which fulfills the whole complete purpose. So it says, how can one wishing to quickly achieve omniscience not meditate on it? And then there are some who say they fear emptiness, thinking that if I do not exist, then what else? So as I quoted a sutra before, this notion of an I is devilish mind, and it is the source of all other negative emotions. So even if someone may have become an arhat, they still would have some kind of cherishing of themselves, but it is not a negative or afflicted kind of cherishing. But for us, when this cherishing happens, of course, we have this self-cherishing attitude. So although the arahats have this self-cherishing attitude, it's not. It is although they have overcome all delusions within themselves. Due to lack of holding others dearer than themselves, they remained with that. And so, while fear should be with what gives rise to suffering, so if you do not want suffering, if you fear suffering, then you also need to fear the causes of suffering. So the antidote or the counterforce to that is not love, compassion, or bodhisattva, but it is this emptiness, understanding of emptiness. Why? So emptiness specifies suffering. Why be fearful about that? So in order to liberate sentient beings, there are these two types of selflessnesses taught. The selflessness of persons and phenomena. So we have these pain and pleasure, the experience of pain and pleasure, and the experiencer, and then the things which give rise to these pain and pleasure. These are said to be so to establish the emptiness or selflessness of these. First, there's this establishing of the selflessness of persons. If there were something called a self, there would be something to be afraid. So because of this sense of I, and then we think that, oh, this self, because of this, I will attain this and that and so forth. But as one finds self nowhere, who is there to experience fear? Teeth, hair, and nails are not the self, nor is self the bones and blood. Self is neither mucus or phlegm, nor is self lymph or pus. Self is not fat or sweat. Neither self is lungs or liver. So the self is none of these things, neither the consciousness nor these different elements that make us up. So if you use reason, logic, then you'll be able to see this truth. So these are for meditating or cultivating the antidote to the innate clinging or grasping at the self of a person. So the difference between Buddhist and non-Buddhist traditions is that the Buddhists reject the object of this self-grasping, whereas the non-Buddhists actually assert the object of this self-grasping. Therefore, refutation of self as postulated by non-Buddhist tenets holders, like an Atman theory, refutation of Sankhya school's position that consciousness is self. So if the mind perceiving sound is permanent, the sound would be cognized at all times. So since the self or the Atman is permanent, that which sees form, sound, and so forth is permanent. So this knower is said to be unchanging. Because it's permanent, it's unchanging. Such a permanent, unchanging self should see or hear the sounds and see the forms and so forth permanently. But when the self smells something, there is change. Because when seeing a visual object and when smelling some smell, I mean, there is a change between these two, transition from one to the other. Therefore, the self cannot be posited as being permanent as such, because of change in the object that it perceives also. But what is cognized when bereft of an object? For what reason could it be a cognizer? If something could be a cognizer without an object, then absurdly stick would also be a cognizer. Therefore, without being associated with an object, it is certain that cognition is non-existent. It cognizes a sight. What does it also not hear? Why does it not hear at that time? Because the sound is not nearby. Then it is no longer a cognizer of it. How can something having the nature of a sound cognizer become a cognizer of sight? So the self or this Atman is said to be an ultimate reality. By imputation on a single person is a father, imputation on a single person as a father and a son, and not due to this true nature. Likewise, courage particles and so of course if you say that they have the different guises, but then the nature is same, well then it would be impermanent. And suppose the other guise is the very same. Its oneness is a oneness that did not exist before. But its other modes of perception are not true. These please describe its own nature. It is a cognizer. So absurdly, it would follow that all people are one. What has mind and what lacks mind, those two would in fact become the same thing, as their existence is the same. And if the individual identities were false, then what could be their shared basis? Something lacking mind, furthermore, something lacking mind cannot be self, as it has no mind, like a vase or and so forth. It is cognizant because of its conjunction with the mind. It absurdly follows that this non-cognizant has perished. And if the self were unchanging, what could a mind do to it? If the self were devoid of mind and activities, space could also become a self. So, but if a self does not exist, meaning that if the self were not to exist, if there's no permanent self, then it doesn't exist. The connection between actions and their effects could not be maintained. Since actions cease after having been done, to whom should the action be ascribed? Since it is established for both of us that action is the result and the results have a different basis, and that the self of action is not there, is it not pointless to dispute on it? So how do the Buddhists respond? Just as the aggregates change, likewise the person also changes. So therefore, through the shared continuum, so seeing a causal state with the result is never feasible. Then through the shared continuum, the agent and the experiencer are explained. The past and the future minds are not the self. So we'll stop here. We may be able to finish this text tomorrow. May this jeweled, sublime jeweled mind, Bodhisattva, grow where it is not yet grown. May it increase evermore where it has already taken root. May all the parental sentient beings have happiness, well-being. And may the Bodhisattva's aspirations be fulfilled wherever they are.